5, 4, 3, 2, 1. In this lecture, I'm going to talk to you about what science teaches us about happiness and this attitude that I'm calling abundance. Take a look at this diagram. From science, this is what we learn about happiness. Notice 50% of our happiness is hardwired. This has been determined scientifically by studies on identical twins. The first of these studies was conducted in the mid-1970s by researchers at my alma mater, the University of Minnesota. As an aside, one of the lead researchers, in fact, sat on my dissertation committee. These researchers conducted a study of 75 sets of identical twins born between 1930 and 1950 who were raised apart. And about their 40th birthdays, the researchers reached out to these twins and conducted comprehensive psychological measurements on each of them. One of the most important findings about these twins is that although raised apart and measured separately, they had similar happiness scores. No demographic factors like education, religion, income correlated more with their happiness than their genetics. The researchers found, in fact, that they could predict 48% of the happiness of one twin based upon the happiness of another twin. This caused scientists to conclude that there's a happiness set point based on genetics. Imagine a set point scale from 0 to 10. You might be anywhere along this scale from low to high. Of course, people with a high set point don't have to work as hard at being happy. It comes naturally to them. A second source of happiness, according to science, is circumstances. However, notice that only 10% of our happiness is determined by our circumstances, only 10%. And yet this is what most of us believe causes our happiness. As I said, in fact, in an earlier lecture, this means that happiness is not determined by being rich, poor, beautiful, plain, healthy, unhealthy, married, divorced. Even though people go through good and bad experiences or even change their circumstances, they have a tendency to return to their set point between 6 and 12 months later. There's a researcher from Harvard by the name of Dan Gilmore who states that lottery winners and paraplegics are the same on the happiness scale. Can you imagine winning the lottery? Wouldn't you be ecstatic? And initially, lottery winners do get a big bump in their happiness scores, but some 12 months later, they're no happier than they were prior to winning. Likewise, paraplegics drop in happiness following their accidents. Yet some 12 months later, their scores have risen again, so that they're about as happy as they were prior to their accidents. So it seems like whether you win the lottery, get a new job, get out of one relationship into another, get a raise, buy a new car, move into a new, bigger house, over several months, you're not going to be much happier than you were before. And it's true of people who have experienced an accident or had health problems. Changes in our circumstances may raise or lower our happiness by up to around 10%. And 10% isn't nothing, but that seems to be the limit. The truth is, wherever I go, there I am. Mindset trumps circumstances. So this leads researchers to conclude that 40% of our happiness is determined by what some psychologists call intentional activity. I like to think of this as our choice-making ability. Now, 40% isn't everything, but it's a lot. It means that our happiness is not up to chance. We can influence it by how we think and what we do, by the kinds of choices we make. I like to think of it, again, it's a theme that I talk about, living from the inside out rather than outside in. And here's an important point. People who are happier are not so because life treats them better, but because they make better choices. They have better mental strategies for dealing with life. So next, we're going to talk about those strategies. One other point about what we can learn from science. We've learned in recent years about neuroplasticity. Whereas we used to believe that the structure of the brain was set early in life, we now know that the brain can actually adapt and change over time. Our brain changes depending upon how we use it. Just like we can grow strength in an arm through exercise, we can also exercise the areas of our brain if we use those parts of our brain. And the brains of happy people look different than the brains of unhappy people. And the mental strategies that I'm about to teach you not only change our behavior, but they literally change and rewire our brain. And that's what makes this journey about happiness so exciting.